What up, everybody? Hope everyone enjoyed their Thanksgiving as much as I did. I want to thank everyone who reached out to me on my birthday, or reached out to my girlfriend on her birthday. Very much appreciated, very humbling, really appreciate all the shout outs, all the messages, all the phone calls and whatnot. I also want to give a special shout out to all those who attended our little get together at Top Golf over the Thanksgiving weekend. And really to be honest, it was a really good weekend for me. My dad came into town, really surprised me. My mom had been around she came around the early days of my vacation last week. She spent Thanksgiving and whatnot, and then she went and picked up my dad, which was a big surprise. So thank him for showing up and whatnot, and it was really fun little lunch with him and my mom and my girlfriend. So now, real quick business. This Saturday, Reality Wrestling proudly presents Christmas Chaos 9. Very special show to all of us at Reality Wrestling. I was on the very first Christmas Chaos, so this show is very special to me. This is the show where Pro Wrestling Syndicate will invade. Whole slew of matches lined up for already announced. We got the world's greatest tag team going to be in action. They're reuniting and going to be in action, taking on the Reality Wrestling Heavyweight Champion, Tag Team Champions, the New Heavenly Bodies. The Pro Wrestling Syndicate Heavyweight Champion, who's been the champ for about a year, been undefeated for a year. He's going to take on our champion, Mysterious Q. And I'm sure there's a whole slew of other matches, and there's going to be plenty of action. It's going to be a great show for all those that attend. I think there's limited tickets available at this point. I know last year was a big show. It sold out. It was like standing room only, it felt like. So I don't expect any different for this show. Huge show for Reality Wrestling and for us moving forward. And I'm just happy to be part of it. So yeah. Now in this, my last video I mentioned, hey, I was probably didn't have a guest lined up, so I thought, well, I'll do a conversation to all of you, kind of like stuff that I've done in the past, and really cover a whole grand slew of things. However, I'm going to postpone it for a video, for at least this video. I'm not going to get into a whole lot of stuff or topics that I was going to discuss. There was plenty to talk about, plenty that has gone on over the last couple weeks. But I figure I'll talk about that hopefully my next video, if it's not too long. I don't plan it to be, especially if it's going to be just me. I'll release it fairly quickly, probably next week sometime. I do plan on talking to some of the Reality Wrestling superstars and probably some of the Pro Wrestling Syndicate guys, and maybe lining up some videos or conversations moving forward. It's kind of tough on show days and whatnot to film, but maybe I'll get a chance to, even if they're quicker than normal. But anyway, like I said, I was going to do a conversation video, and then my buddy Phillip Barnard, he goes by Heartthrob Phillip Barnard. He's a wrestler. He's also reffed. He's also been a manager. But he also reports. He reports for the Examiner, does a column relating to the wrestling business. He covers, mainly he used to cover the Houston area, but now he covers like Texas, and he covers the mainstream stuff. We had a great conversation. He hit me up. Trying to work out a schedule is kind of tough at times, but he had some free time over my vacation, so he reached out to me, and I was up to doing a conversation. So we sat down and had a really good conversation. The unfortunate part is we really got rolling after the camera stopped rolling. You know, this is a lengthy video, as you probably can already tell. As some of them are, but then once I turned it off, because I really have about a 2-hour limit on it, and I could have probably kept the audio going, but we weren't really thinking we were going to get into another conversation. Then we got into a whole slew of other topics. But with that being said, this video, very enlightening. Two points of view, two differing points of view. There were some topics that we discussed. You know, we talked about the CWF situation, a couple of their last shows, some of the controversy within both shows. We talked about the current product. We talked about the Houston scene where NWA Lone Star is no longer part of the NWA. Now they're Lone Star Championship Wrestling. We got into that. we got into some of the differences that have occurred since he started reporting on wrestling to now. And it was just fun. It's really fun to talk to someone who's knowledgeable about the products, knowledgeable about the business, but more importantly, he reports on the business. So I thought he'd be a great person to talk to. Now, like I said, I'll reach out to not just reality wrestling superstars or pro wrestling syndicate guys. I will also probably reach out to others. I tend to reach out to people, see if they're going to be in the Houston area, and if they are, I'm like, hey, if you've got some time, I know how shows are and whatnot, and hopefully coming up pretty soon, I'll be maybe possibly traveling. I'll talk about that next week or in my next video. So be on the lookout for that. But now, on to this one. So sit back, enjoy, and relax. But more importantly, enjoy my sit-down conversation with the heartthrob, Phillip Barnard. Until the next time, later. Heartthrob.
Yes.
Phillip Barnard.
Finally.
And I thought people had a hard enough time calling me sexy. How you been, man?
I've been good, man.
Good.
Staying busy. Between the wrestling, Examiner, life at the airport, life in general.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, there's never a dull moment with me.
So, we'll get into the Examiner stuff because I'm very intrigued by that somewhat transition from being a wrestler to reporting on wrestling. But how did you get your start? Like, not how'd you get your start, but like your earliest memory of wrestling. Like what, not so much the earliest memory, but what captured your interest in it?
Oh, wow.
Was there something specific, a specific character, or?
Well, when I was growing up, after my mom and dad split, I started getting into wrestling a little bit more. I kind of always watched a little bit, but never really, got into it. I was a big baseball guy growing up. My dad raised me on the Cubs, and I swore up and down to everybody that listened that I was going to play for the Cubs one day.
Okay.
And one day I just turned on wrestling on TBS and saw wrestling, and I just kind of started going back and forth.
Okay.
And then after mom and dad split, I started making trips down to Dallas. I was living in Oklahoma at the time.
Okay.
And kind of caught the tail end days of World Class.
Towards the end, like after all the Barnard.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And I made a few trips down there as a kid. I remember, vaguely some of that. And then I guess what really picked up on it, I think when I started going full time watching it, was I want to say around the '93 Survivor Series, '94 Rumble.
Okay.
And then from that point on, it's just kind of been steady from that point.
Okay. Okay. So how long? What made you decide to get into the wrestling business? What was it?
I remember the night that I made the decision, actually.
Okay.
Growing up in North Oklahoma, there was a promotion based out of Oklahoma City, Mid-South Wrestling.
Okay.
And it was run by a guy by the name of Tom Jones. He used to team up with Ernie Ladd back in the 70s, early 80s.
Okay.
They did a road show one night, a little town called Blackwell, Oklahoma. And I remember driving over there with a friend of mine from high school, Joe Brock. And the main event that night was supposed to have been, if I remember right, Honky Tonk Man versus Jake Roberts.
Wow. Okay.
And
quite the main event.
something changed during the course of the night, and it ended up being Jake versus Greg the Hammer Valentine.
Okay.
And I just remember watching. It was a mix of some of the legends and some of the Mid-South guys. And I just remember seeing the guys come out there, getting the reactions they were getting from the crowds, and just kind of the whole atmosphere of coming out and just entertaining.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I want to do that.
Okay.
So I don't know exactly what possessed me from becoming a baseball player to, hey, let me get my ass kicked night in, night out for a living. But that I remember vividly. That was the night that I made the decision, and I went and talked to Tom after the show, and I said, hey, what do I have to do to get started? That was in December of '99.
Okay.
And 2 months later, I was started.
And starting like your training and
Yep.
such.
Yep.
And he wasn't real. He was real welcoming with that, or was he like whatever kid?
I think at the start he was just I think he was more of the whatever, you know.
Yeah.
I get people come up to me all the time, hey, you know, I want to do this.
Mhm.
But he gave me his contact information, and right before my birthday in February, drove down to Oklahoma City and started training.
Well, we started, so February 2000?
Yeah.
We started, like, roughly around the same time. I mean, different spots.
Sure.
I tried, really my biggest, probably, I don't want to say regret, because obviously I've enjoyed my career and I can look back at it now and be real fond with it. I mean, when you look back, it's like, oh man, it wasn't half as bad. Although in the midst of it, it's like, God, this is terrible. But I remember like going to Shawn Michaels school, getting the brochure and looking up and realizing like $3,900 before you step foot in a ring, and there was no way. There's just no conceivable way, because I was one of those guys that if I hadn't started roughly around the time I started, I'm sure the phase would have passed me. Sure. I would have gotten interested in something else and been like, never mind, I don't want to do that. But luckily I found a place in Austin that had a payment plan, which was huge.
Right.
For a guy like me, I was willing to work 2 jobs at the time, and just so I could pay my tuition, because obviously back then you weren't even really getting paid for matches. It was all pay your dues, or you're getting a little bit that would ultimately just go right back to them. So how long had you been wrestling or in the business before you started working for the Examiner? And what prompted you to start working for the Examiner?
Oh, jeez. I started working for Examiner in 09.
Okay. So you've been doing it about 9 years at that point?
Roughly. What year was it that we lost your mind? Was it 08 or 09? Because I remember the first article that I wrote for Examiner was covering his death.
I want to say it was 09.
It was like November-ish of 09.
Yeah. Okay. No. Yeah, I could see that.
And when back in 2002, I was living down in Nashville, and I was splitting time between wrestling for NWA Main Event and working for a little independent local city newspaper covering sports like high school football.
Okay.
And my fiance.
So you had been doing reporting while you were wrestling, not reporting on wrestling, but just
in general, yeah.
Yeah, doing journalistic stuff.
Yeah. So I had a little bit of experience coming in. My fiance at the time, Lakeisha Oliver, actually got me on the newspaper with her.
Okay.
And she was the one who actually got me my foot in the door at NWA.
Okay.
Working for Mike Porter. And I want to say it was right around 08, 09, she started writing for him.
Okay.
And she said, hey, I'm covering, some of the scenes here in Tennessee, the Nashville area. You got to get a hold of Examiner to see if they have something open down there. And I just moved to Houston in 08. So I contacted Examiner and found out that there just happened to be a Houston Examiner.
Okay.
And so I jumped on board with that. And like I said, my first article, I believe, was 09. It was covering Umaga.
Wow. And what a first story. Is
Yeah, yeah.
Ultimately, the passing of I wrestled him. Funny, Christmas Chaos 9, I think. Yeah, it'll be released. This video will be released the week of that. But I was Christmas Chaos 1 and facing Umaga, and at that point he was no one got offense on that guy. Like Cena was having trouble with him. Triple H couldn't get. So it's like if Triple H can't get offense, there's no. What am I doing?
Right.
I do recall that did save me from a tremendous amount of headache because back then, as much as Book is on hands now, I don't deal with him as much in that respect. But back then, the big thing, because it was like the first show, was rehearsal. Everybody had to go through their match. You had to critique it. I avoided all that because I was going to wrestle Umaga, so it was like, I ain't worried about you.
Right.
But, yeah. Shoot. Always getting stuff. Always getting it on. So, with that said, hell of a story. So you've been with the Examiner since then?
Since then, yeah. Matter of fact, just got an email from them last week congratulating me on my 5 years with them.
Wow. Outside of the Umaga stuff, how has reporting on the industry, because you report on pretty much everything from the mainstream to even local promotions, do you have like a region that you have to cover with it? I mean, outside of the mainstream, or is it just anything on the indie level that's newsworthy?
When I first started, I was basically restricted just to Houston, because the official title, even to this day, the official title is Houston Pro Wrestling Examiner. But if anything happens mainstream that I can put a local spin on it,
okay,
then I can cover it. So like if something happens with, if Austin makes news, or The Undertaker, or Shawn Michaels,
okay,
because they're Texas based,
yeah,
then I can put something on it, and make some content out of it.
mm-hmm.
They give me a little bit of leeway, if something big happens, like with the CM Punk situation, with him walking out last year. I've kind of taken a few liberties with that, as far as just trying to create content,
mm-hmm.
for my own page views or whatever.
Yeah.
But now I cover mostly. I do what I can to cover all around Texas.
Okay.
If anything happens mainstream, I'll take a look at that. But
mm-hmm.
I try to keep best I can mostly in Texas.
Okay. I'm trying to think of. So how's that affected you, being in the industry and having to report on it? Does it affect you as far as, I mean, I've talked to some guys who do podcasts. It's a little different because they're having to generate content. I mean, how often are you having to generate content for your column and such?
I try to do it weekly if I can.
Okay.
Doesn't always happen that way, but
yeah.
For the most part, weekly to bi-weekly if I can.
Okay. So does it affect, and having to come up with content, does it affect your viewing habits? Do you have to view it more? Do you feel like you have to view it, or is it just a situation of it doesn't change your viewing habits because you'll view it irregardless? Because like for me, Mondays, irregardless of what's going on, I will watch Raw.
Right.
It's ingrained in my memory. It's been there since its inception. Big fan of Monday Night Wars. I don't watch as much TNA. I'll watch SmackDown. I can fast forward through. Raw, I try to just sit through 3 hours, which sometimes if I get home late, it's going to be late night, I might say, I'll break it up, and Tuesday I'll watch the rest, and it never fails.
Sure.
I watch NXT. I mean, I watch it because I like wrestling. Like it, I don't report on it. I never wanted it to really be. I never wanted my show to become one of those shows, or like a podcast where I felt like I have to report on it, or give my views on it, or review it. If I don't want to talk about it, I just won't talk about it. Because a lot of it is, especially with the WWE product, which we'll talk probably in depth, or as in depth as we want to talk about it. I find a lot of repetition, a lot of redundancy, a lot of, same matchups all the time.
Right.
And if I had to report on it, I could probably see getting exhausted. And I found that, some, like the Renegade Wrestling Radio guys, especially Hyman, told me, it doesn't affect me, or Abel, it doesn't affect me, Abel with Houston Wrestling Radio, it doesn't really affect me. I just was curious, with you, does it affect your viewing? Do you feel like you have to be more conscientious of what's going on, especially through Texas, now that your region is kind of expanded for you so you could generate content? Do you see it changing any, or are you just
It doesn't really affect me as far as how I watch.
Mm-hmm.
I guess it makes me more aware of what's going on.
Okay.
From a standpoint of when I first started writing for Examiner, I only paid attention to the Houston area. So it's NWA Houston, Booker,
mm-hmm.
PWA, just the local guys that were running.
Okay.
But now that I've kind of started covering a little bit more statewide, I'm more aware of what's going on with San Antonio, Austin, up in the Dallas area.
Okay.
So it's not so much how I watch, because I'm still going to watch regardless. I'm like you. It doesn't matter. Monday nights, if I'm home, I'm grilled right there.
Yeah.
And thanks to
as my girlfriend walks past, she can attest, And I'll tell her Monday nights, like it's 10 o'clock, and I'm going. She's like, "You still have to watch Raw, don't you?" And I'm like, "No, I still have to."
That's why I try to work on Monday night.
Yeah.
See, that's brilliant.
Well, no, for her, like it's odd because when I met her, huge wrestling fan. Of course, then she starts hanging out with wrestlers, and it's anyone. I'll tell anyone if you want to be entertained 4 days, watch wrestlers watch the product, especially like WrestleMania, like the ones where we can become fan. Like I'm like, no, dude, I'm always a fan. I watch, I'm a fan. I don't try to break it down. I'm not a student really anymore, although you're always a student of game. Sure. I don't try to watch it in that to analyze it. But you get a bunch of us there who think we know, and she will outpredict us 9 times out of 10 without really even watching the product. But I realized really wasn't until recently we watched one of the NXT specials, and that's one of the only shows that we'll actually watch. A lot of it has to do with it being an hour, it being on the network. So there's not if we don't watch it right when it airs, oh, no big deal. Plus it's only an hour. She really likes the characters because everyone stands out. Right. Whereas with WWE, sometimes, well, I can't even say that because I think everyone tries to have their place within it. But, well, yeah, I was just really interested about your viewing habits. Now, from the time that you started reporting on it, the Houston wrestling scene has gone through tremendous changes. You know, we talked about Booker going for PWA, I think in 2006 to 2010, 2011, no, maybe 2012, going to ROW. Yeah. The stuff with WOW going to become an NWA affiliate, and for a while there being the true, I guess, for us, the local affiliate of NWA, and now the changes that have gone on with that, which we can cover in a bit. And then the little promotions here and there. Like I think the last time we spoke in-depthly, because we talk here and there, but the last in-depth conversation of this was like a behind-the-curtain filming where we were at the ECW, not to be mistaken with Extreme Championship Wrestling.
Not ECW.
The Elite, right. Elite Championship Wrestling. The greatest example of grand opening, grand closing. Like I remember me and Jay, before we took that gig, and we took the gig, the guy had contacted me, and I think at first he tried to contact me to work, and I was like, well, I'm not really working yet. I'm still kind of in that, I'm going to come back, but let me do it right. Let me get my body in a certain way before I try to get back into the rigors of it. I was still like a couple of months away. I recall we had that choice of, okay, well, we can do the ECW show. And we were just tickled by the fact that it was an ECW show. Like we did Fake Chance, you know, we did all that. I think on the road trip going up to the show, we could have gone to MPX out of the Dallas area, and we had gone there in September, and we just felt like, well, we've been there, we've reported on them, we've gotten them over,
You've been there enough.
Well, when we were doing that, much like with the ECW show, it was like sit down with guys or stand up with guys, get them over, get them interviewed, and then for that show to cancel.
God, I thought I was the only one who remembered that.
No. I remember. It's odd because it's on the behind the curtain video. I'd found Tex Lone Star, big indie fan. Had him on my show recently, but. You know, it was always fun to try to get him out of the Tex Lone Star stuff. Like, I saw him, he was just a fan, so we were just talking, because we always like talking, because he's just a big fan of it. So it was great to see, and he was one of only like 10 people that were actually there at that menu at that point. But I remember the promoter coming up to us in the midst of us filming and like, hey man, can I talk to you for a second? And him telling me, I don't have money to pay these guys, and I don't think I'm going to be drawing. And at that point, I was like, well, you're just going to have to pay him. And he was like, well, what would you do? I'm going, buddy, if I'm talent and you come to me and tell me that the guarantee you couldn't provide me the guarantee we agreed upon, you're not walking out of here. You know, like that's old school stuff. Now, if you tell me, hey, there's no guarantee, we work for the door, it's kind of okay. Well, then fine, there's no guarantee. But if you guarantee me any amount, I expect that amount. I don't expect oh man, we didn't draw what we were planning. I don't want to hear your sob story. I don't care if we're friends. I've had that, and it infuriates me to no end to have friends who are like, can I get you next time? No, you can get me now. Get me now. Worry about everybody else later. I don't know.
Guarantee me this is what I came in for. Pay me.
Yeah, so I was telling him, like, you can cancel the show, but you may still have to pay these guys. I mean, that's really up to them if they want to take an issue with you. Because I think even if a show gets canceled, it is almost one of the situations of, that didn't prevent me from driving up here. You didn't wait till, you could have told me the day of before I started getting on the road. But I remember us talking about it then. But what changes have you seen that have really shocked you, as far as, or made you, gave you cause for pause, as far as from the time that you started reporting on it to now?
As far as locally, or
yeah, just I looked at the WOW when NWA came about and they were reforming it. I was in those early conversations when Ken Taylor was still part of it. Ken coming up to, contacting me kind of out of the blue, was like, we're going to revamp it. And I have my issues with the way they did it, because I had my problems with Ken when he would approach us about, hey, we're going to revitalize it. Well, do you have a building, Ken? No. Well, so your promotion's not really a promotion. You just use the brand, the NWA, to kind of piggyback off of companies. But with that said, Ken and I never had issues. But he left it in the hands of other promoters, and that's where the issues kind of resided. But yeah, like as far as that goes, because I mean that was huge when especially once Tony Brooklyn and Bruce Thorpe started, hey, we're going to revitalize the brand, and you have your naysayers. I was like, hey man, if it gets guys more work, awesome. If guys are working more often, all good. But I mean, has anything stood out to you as far as stuff within from the time you started reporting to now?
I remember, like what you were talking about with the WOW thing. I remember when they switched over, and I was kind of in on some of the early conversations on what was going to be happening with the NWA taking over and the big lawsuit that was going on, and some of the things that were involving Ken Taylor. I never spoke to Ken.
Yeah.
I heard a lot of things, which being in the industry, you hear a lot of things about a lot of people.
Yeah.
But I was in on a lot of those early conversations, and it was just weird for me because I didn't know, okay, they're bringing the NWA in, we know the history behind that name, we know, what it's about. My question at that point is, what's that going to mean for the guys who are already established there?
Yeah.
Is that going to cause, what's that going to do for them? Is that going to mean more work for them? Or if it's with the NWA coming in now, is it going to be a situation where they're only going to use NWA guys?
Yeah.
Like, are they only going to use guys from the Dallas area or from other places that are just under the NWA banner?
Yeah.
And I noticed that they didn't really exclude anybody, and that's a good thing for me, because for me reporting, you get to see a lot of guys that's it's hard to explain, because the guys that were already established there, you want to see Texas wrestling do as good as it can. And that's a problem, because you see so much drama and so much crap between a lot of people, a lot of places. But a lot of the guys got used, and that was a good thing. Then we saw kind of a infiltration of San Antonio and Austin guys come in.
Yeah.
And it seemed, you saw with them coming in, some of the older guys kind of started getting pushed out a little bit. It wasn't really anything that really shocked me, though.
Okay.
'Cause I think it's just things progressing. It was just things. Tony Brooklyn was just trying to shake things up and change what was going on. So I didn't really see anything that really just struck me as wow.
Yeah. Well, okay. On that, what's your view of my thought on like the NWA, I guess business formula, as I saw it, was there was not an NWA per se. There was not an NWA like these are our guys in the sense of there's a building that is NWA. There was the NWA brand that would go to Branded Outlaw Wrestling in San Antonio and go, we like what you're doing, work with us, pay us some member fee, and we'll put the NWA in front of your brand that you've already, because Branded Outlaw is an example of a company that was doing fairly well without the need for the NWA.
Right.
Outside of, well, if you work with us, you get this NWA talent, you get the world champion, which I thought was great because when I was with the NWA and working for NWA Southwest, which had a building, and was their champ and recognized, and I was in the world title rankings, outside of the anniversary show, there wasn't a lot of interaction between companies. And moreover, I might have been a top tier guy at NWA Southwest, but if I went to NWA Battle Zone in Mississippi, I was a known name, like there was no build up for me, and I got squashed in like 2 minutes by a big hulking guy, and almost didn't get paid, and almost got really ugly. And luckily Hernandez was there, and he was the cooler head, and like, calm down, I'll take care of it. No man, I'm gonna beat this. No, and got me paid, but
Right.
So I see the new model, and again, you got like Branded Outlaw Wrestling. WOW, like changed completely. I had friends who were part of the old guard for WOW, and in the midst when the Scott Summers and Jacobs Pliskins and a lot of the Austin, San Antonio talent was coming in, and while they brought in name recognition to a degree, especially on the indie level, especially a guy like Scott, who was really on a hot streak at that point, considered one of the top guys, if not the top guy in Texas, and to have him on your brand and to see like the NWA World Title defended in Houston was great. But at the same time, I look at companies like a Branded Outlaw Wrestling, which was doing fine attendance-wise. Like I didn't see a major boost in attendance. At least I couldn't see it. Same thing with like Inspire Pro, which recently joined up with the NWA. But again, you guys were seemingly doing fine. Like, how do you feel? Do you feel like a company? I mean, again, if they can do it, great, more power to them. But does that make the NWA a true brand in the sense, or are they just piggybacking off these other established promotions? I mean, outside of NWA Lone Star, which went through a whole name change, and that was kind of like, this is how we're going to branch out. So far, what I've seen is just like companies that are already established, that already have their established roster. NWA comes in, they work out whatever deal. Again, I don't know what money's exchanged. I'm sure there's a fee to be a member. But what benefit is it for that company? Is it just, well, we can bring in this NWA talent? Or, I mean, what's your view of it?
I think that kind of depends on whoever's running that particular promotion. Like with Branded Outlaw, I've seen their attendance numbers before they joined up with the NBA, and like you were saying, they were doing fine. I've seen pictures and numbers and everything, and their crowds were hot. They've got the core talent over there that they need. They've got the crowds coming in. So from a business aspect, they didn't necessarily need the NBA.
Okay.
But like you were saying, you bring them in, you get the opportunity, you get a little bit more exposure.
Okay.
Because now you're part of this name that's got this historic value.
Okay.
Which, depending on who you talk to, it may not be the same as it was, when it was in Charlotte, based on.
Yeah. Well, I don't think it's ever going to be like what it was in its heyday. I don't, because again, it is one of those situations where NWA is in essence, we don't have a building, we don't have a ring.
Right.
We have talent who have we have belts we can parse out to whoever. We can get them defended in Japan, and that works for some talent. It doesn't work for all the talent, which is neither here nor there. But I just don't see it as it's different. Whereas I see like the ROW brand, where it's like, no, we're bringing our guys who represent our brand. They're not we're not we might be an affiliation as far as like cross promoting, but we're not saying ROW Mississippi. We're saying no, we're ROW, and I'm bringing my wrestlers. Again, Book's a little different. He works with guys a little differently. But yeah, back to what you were saying as far as
it's exposure if you bring that name in. And I talked to Tony Brooklyn. He wasn't trying to recreate what was.
yeah.
He wanted to create something that, you know, kind of lived up to a new age and bring kind of a new spin on, you know, on tradition.
Mm-hmm.
So when you bring the NWA in, you're getting the name value, you're getting the exposure, and you're getting a lot of help because now you're getting that world champion. Okay, so you go from having a card where you have, you know, Scott Summers versus Lance Hoyt for the NWA Texas title.
Yeah.
Okay, now you have Scott Summers versus Rob Conway for the NWA World title.
Mm.
So that's going to bring in, I think, a little bit more extra value to your shows, as opposed to where you have someplace that's maybe struggling to bring in numbers.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, yeah, we're going to pay that member fee. Now you may be running into that theory of maybe you're piggybacking off the name.
Okay.
But yeah, with Branded Outlaw, they didn't necessarily need it. I think it was a good thing for them.
Yeah.
But it wasn't. They didn't do it out of necessity.
I found it odd because again they were running seemingly their own thing. They're the Outlaw promotion. And I saw some of the talent they had, and I was like, well, that's great because it's another company in San Antonio running on a monthly basis, which we can get into in a minute as far as how it's changed from when we started to now as far as how often companies run. But I found it odd. I found it even way more odd, the Inspire Pro, where they went, no, we're affiliated with NWA. And then I'm completely shocked when I look on Facebook and I see Tony Brooklyn kind of being cryptic, and I'm not affiliated with them in any stretch of the imagination. My affiliation with even WOW ended before it could really begin. What's your understanding of why Tony decided to break away from the NWA? Because I mean, honestly, they built it here. Like in Houston, they built it. It was becoming this thing. It seemingly was the global headquarters for NWA, right, for all intents and purposes. And he's one of the main guys. He was vice president, I believe. I remember watching that that televised show that was on like midnight, I think, like their only airing of this, like, I think it had 2 or 3 matches. I know Mike Dell was in it with Ray Rowe. I think that was one of the matches. The Invasion Show. Yep. It didn't have any of the, well, no, it wasn't the Invasion Show. It was like, I think the Kings of the Underground faced Lance Hoyt, the Killer Elite Squad. It was like those 2 matches. I just remember like the intro was a lot of Bruce and a lot of Tony hyping the NWA, and then it was a couple of matches and that it was what it was. But what's your understanding of why Tony decided to, in essence, break away? I mean, now there is no Houston affiliate of NWA at this point.
I haven't talked to him about this whole thing yet. I'd like to.
Yeah.
Because that could be, you know, something with me doing the reporting now. You know, that's kind of a big thing now.
Yeah, especially if they've got a show coming up in January. I think their first, I guess it's Lone Star Championship Wrestling, I think is what it's called now. Yep. I'm real curious as to what that means, because he had all this talent, and in some respects, I don't want to say they did an exclusivity thing, although I've had my issues with Talking Chaz in the past when it comes to working other promotions. I've been a booker on a show and had been given grief for our show. Just, I mean, when I was doing IWE, I was real big about, no one else was doing it that I saw outside of maybe ACW, where, and at that time it was like MySpace was the thing, right, telling guys, here's a really cool flyer, like, put it on your profile page, hype it up, like, be really proud of the fact that you're on a show. And I see it now. I see a lot of talent doing that. It's almost become the necessity. But I found it really odd that he would break away from them, because he was one of the reasons that they were here. And I'm real curious as to what does that mean for the talent. Because again, the exclusivity thing to a degree was there, where if you worked for them to a degree, you couldn't work other places in Houston. You know, like you couldn't work for Bob and Humble because for some reason there was this belief that you were going to tarnish their product, which kind of is what it is. I've always looked at exclusivity of weigh your options as far as, okay, the company that's telling you to be exclusive, what are they really offering you that the company that they're telling you to be exclusive from, or other companies, what do they offer that the other company doesn't offer?
Right.
You know, in the case of Reality Wrestling, when they did their exclusivity thing, they had just signed a national deal, and there were some issues with guys getting hurt and guys not being utilized properly in their mind. And I could kind of see it, but at the same time, they had the leverage of going, well, we're on the internet, we got 2 TV deals,
right.
So you're going to get exposure, irregardless of what the time slot is, irregardless of this, that, and the other. It's still something that you're not going to get. No offense to NWA. I rarely see a lot of just anything being put out from NWA, just as a whole.
Right.
Like I might see the off match here and there, but outside of like ACW, who does their video wires, RCW, which does a pretty good job of video wires, although sometimes when they do their recap shows, it seems very too long for a highlight show.
Yeah.
Outside of those two, Reality Wrestling was like one of the few that was doing, I mean, they had an internet show for a while. And again, like when I first came to books, I remember having the conversations with Sir Talent going, YouTube's the future. Like that's, if you're not at the very least putting stuff out, and I'm like, you don't have to put out matches. IWE, we never really put out matches. We put out like, here's a segment, just so you can kind of see who the talent
Just
is.
a little taste of it.
Yeah, so maybe you like the talent. Maybe you come in just to see the talent. Because I was always like, well, you don't really want to put out footage or matches, because then why would the fans want to come necessarily see it if they can just...
If they can get it for free
Yeah.
right there, yeah.
But yeah, I'm just real curious as to what the Tony Brooklyn stuff is. Now, another place you and I work or have worked for, which recently got into a bit of some issues, and I think you were part of both Coastal Mania? Okay, so now I have a person who was actually there. Like my deal with CWF, to be real honest, Derek always paid me well. I remember being not medically cleared, being stripped of the title, and still getting my pay. Like, hey, you're not medically cleared, we've got to strip you. Which I was like, hey man, I'll be back. By the time we run another show, I'll be back and we could do it right. But by that point, they're like, no, we've moved on. I'd heard about Coastal Mania, but at that point there was the exclusivity thing, and I felt like, hey, be an example, you work backstage. And I was really, I'm on hiatus anyway, I don't necessarily want to deal with it. So you were at the Coastal Mania show. Now, was that show like a 9-hour show? How?
It felt like it.
Because I heard the first match was a 45-minute, and some people tell me classic, and I go, is it really a classic? It's the first match, and mind you, they might have gone 45 minutes, but does that work for the show as a whole? Like,
If your first match is a 45-minute classic, what's that say for the rest of your show?
well, if you had like 4 matches, even at that point, it's still like, I don't know, maybe because I work with Book now and I'm such a big fan of TV wrestling, and I've always been a fan of TV wrestling, like, I'm cool with 6 or 7 minutes. I mean, there was a point probably in my career when I first started doing TV and the first time they were like, you got 5 minutes.
Sure.
And me going, 5 minutes? Man, I haven't even strolled around the ring yet. What are you talking about? I'm just
Right.
getting started. So what was your impression of the Coastal Mania show? Because I haven't heard a good thing about it. I've asked talent about it. I haven't heard one positive, like, I had a good experience at that show. I've heard negative. So I've heard it wasn't organized. They changed the card a number of times. The talent that they did bring in, the names were like, wanted to, again, because of that first match, it was 45 minutes going, guys, we're already behind.
Right.
I mean, if you have a 45-minute match be your first match, you're already, and you've got 13 or 14 matches, which on paper sounds like a lot, even though the ROW TV tapings are usually 12 matches, but it's different. It's 5-6 minutes, no more than 10, and they're in and out. The transitions are, I mean, they're very tightly run. Having been back there, and no one wants to piss off Booker, so it's always like, just make sure it's right. Timing, I mean, everything's kind of very heavily structured, whereas that show didn't seem structured. But again, what was your impression of Coastal Mania? And then we'll talk about the Mesquite show in a minute.
I like the concept behind Coastal Mania. But I just thought, from an overall product, I thought it was too much. They normally run their shows down in Lamarck, down at the Army Regionals. You know that place very well.
Yeah. And they draw decent. Like, I mean, whatever they're doing okay, because when I was at those shows, they drew decently enough that it wasn't like, I'm only in front of 50 people. You were in front of a good-sized crowd. The crowd seemed really amped to be there.
It's not a standing room only crowd in Lamarck, but at the same time, it's not 20 or 30 people. You know, you're getting a good crowd that's hot pretty much all night long, and they're into just about everything that happens. I mean, it's a fun place to go down to.
Yeah.
But the problem is, and I think from a lot of guys who you're used to working cards that are 8, 9, 10 matches, you look on the card and you see 14, 15 matches, you're just thinking, oh, Jesus, this is going to be 3 o'clock before we get out of here.
Yeah.
And then you look at the laundry list of names that they brought in. The meet and greet looked like a Royal Rumble.
Yeah.
I've worked for Derek now for a couple of years. I love working with him. You know, he's just like you. He's always taking care of me. He's as far as I'm concerned, he's always done right by me.
Yeah.
And if anything has happened, you know, he's done his part to make up for it.
Yeah.
But it just seemed like it was just too much. And we've sat down and we've had talks with him before. You know, not every night has to be 14, 15 matches.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where you run into your problem, because when you have your opening promo is 30 minutes, then you have your first match, which is 30 to 45 minutes.
Yeah.
You're already an hour and a half behind schedule. You're not even to your second match yet. But a lot of people have a lot of nasty things to say.
Well, here was a prime example. Like, here's where I had, even if I had considered working there. Again, I'm complete. You know, if I'm in that strange, like, will I, won't I?
Right.
Again, it's all body stuff. It's a lot of stuff like, what's the payoff? And not necessarily financially. Why would I want to go there? The one thing I noticed, and I've talked to some of the talent that was there, the one thing I noticed, again, is as they're building towards Coastal Mania, I'm looking at the flyer, and I see a bunch of faces that I recognize. However, I don't see a bunch of faces from the promotion that I recognize. I see Raven. I see the Von Erich kids. I see Kevin Von Erich. I don't see any local talent. And I remember talking to some of the local talent and going, you guys are like the champions. Why aren't you on the flyer? And then I think later on they did release a like
a
locals,
yeah.
like a locals. No, these are the also rans. These aren't the stars per se. That's how I felt. Like, it seemed like so many, and it was all Photoshop, so just like different lighting, so on and so forth. So it was just this overabundance, and I've seen other companies do that, and I always kind of shake my head to some degree, because I'm going, you're giving no credence to the guys like you that have been there, who have, because one thing about CWF that I've noticed, even when I got there, just the amount of turnover. Like, there's only a select few that are from show to show that are consistently there. Now, you as a talent who were kind of an important piece, because you were, I think at that point, managing a group, how do you, I mean, again, flyers are flyers, but knowing that it's the biggest show of the year and you're tapped to be on this and probably in a high profile situation, how does it feel to see just a bunch of names on a card representing a company that, I mean, when the show's over, they're not sticking around. The Von Erich guys aren't going to be back necessarily. Say what you will about the kids themselves. I mean, hey, they are actually Von Erich, so hey, if their dad wants to put them in wrestling, or they wanted to be in wrestling, and they can get some name recognition off that, I don't have a problem with it. But I do have a problem with, if I'm the champ of that promotion and I'm not on the flyer, I have a problem with it. But for you, like, how was that? Like, just
I'm the same with it because it goes back. You nailed it. It's you put this list of recognizable names on the flyer, and that's great to push the fact that hey, they're coming in. We're going to have this show that's going to feature Raven and Bret Hart, all these guys whoever you want to bring in. But at the same time, just like you were saying, what's it say about the local guys? Because you're not putting the guys that built that company.
yeah,
And that's the problem is not just with CWF, but from a lot of places in general. I've seen it done 100 times, and it drives me nuts because, okay, yeah, I'm going to be interested to see whoever you spent $1,000 to bring in.
yeah,
But at the same time, I'm interested in what built your company.
yeah,
The guys that are there every single show.
yeah.
Just like what you're saying, you're not bringing the Von Erichs in every single night, per se. You're getting guys like, you're getting me, you're getting Nate Laws, you're getting Onyx Cooper, you're getting...
I mean, you got Lance Beretta. I mean, I remember, I think one of my first shows, Jake was there.
Yeah.
And Jake was in a bad way.
Yeah.
I mean, it's funny, he walked out like, took his car, hit the guy. And I think he was scheduled, I remember looking at the card and like, he's scheduled to be probably the main. And me and Lance are like, wait a minute, guys, we're the title match. Like, I understand if Jake was fresh off a WWE run and you feel like that's going to generate interest. I didn't see any drop off from the following show where I saw like the same crowd, the same number. Jake didn't necessarily push the needle one way or the other. And I was happy that he did walk out to some degree because, well, now you guys are the main. And it was like, well, cool, I main evented a show that featured Jake's name. Awesome. I've done that numerous times. Not a big deal. But at the same time, yeah, I just... so Coastal Mania happens. I heard some issues with pay, some guys. I mean, again, because no matter how great you try to draw, you're not going to necessarily be able to... As many names as they brought in,
Right.
you're already in the red. Talk to me about the Mesquite show. I wrestled for EWF for when they were at their heyday, and they were going to bring back Houston wrestling at its finest, and we had a great mixture of names as well as local talent, and the local talent was featured. Like, I went over on Vampiro and Christopher Nowinski like during my run there, which was phenomenal. Terry Funk, I don't want to say put over Hernandez, but I think he might have in the very first show. We brought in like Eddie Guerrero, like a slew of names, and then you travel to a place that's not your local. Like, we went to Odessa, Texas, and we ran against Pat Green of all people at a festival, and we drew 100 people in like this arena. So I've been there. I've been there where it seemingly felt like, okay, this could be a big deal. Now we're traveling, and we're bringing all these names, and it's gonna, and it not work. What was the draw like at the Mesquite show? Was it a good draw, or was it? Was it good for an indie show, but not good for a name? They had TNA guys at that show, or quote unquote TNA, because I think they had Kaz and Daniels there. Yeah. They're not TNA guys anymore. They're, Gail Kim's like a TNA person. I mean, you can't say AJ Styles is a TNA guy because he's no longer TNA.
Right.
What was it? One thing. What was it like there for you? Was it still a matter of chaos there, much like Coastal Mania? Did it seem like the chaos was still there? And then the not getting paid. Some guys not getting paid.
The draw itself obviously could have been better.
Yeah. I mean, you got the Von Erichs kind of in their home.
Yeah, I was going to say, from where the building was, it was expected to draw more because it was kind of home base for them. And it's the Mesquite Rodeo. It's a building that the Von Erichs know very, very well.
Yeah.
And matter of fact, I was talking with a couple of people in the locker room who were there during the Von Erichs' big heydays in Mesquite, and it just you expected more.
Yeah.
But it was another issue of we knew coming in who was advertised. It's like we knew Gail and Angelina were going to be there, we knew the Von Erichs were going to be there, and then it's like we get there and all of a sudden now Kaz and Daniels are there, and there's a few other, Stevie Richards is there, and I'm like, okay, now you're putting yourself further back in the hole, which I love working with the guys. They're great guys to be around and work with. But again, it's an issue of what about your local guys?
Yeah.
You want to take your guys on the road and showcase them, while at the same time, hey, we got these other guys that are coming in, for name value. It could have been a lot better.
Mm-hmm.
There was a lot more chaos, I think, there than it was in Galveston.
Okay.
But the payoff with a lot of guys not getting paid, that created a lot of confusion and a lot of anger.
Yeah.
Because we all, we're all expecting, to get paid, and then, we get told a couple other things. The gate wasn't what it was supposed to be.
Mm-hmm.
NASCAR was over in Fort Worth that weekend, so we weren't expecting to get the media coverage that we were looking for.
Mm-hmm.
Just a number of different things were brought up.
Yeah.
And a couple of guys got up during the explanation and they stormed out.
Yeah.
They said, screw this, we're not going to be a part of this. We drove 4-6 hours, to bust our asses here, and, this is what we get.
Yeah.
Which I can understand. I've more than once made a long drive and, not gotten paid for it.
Yeah.
So I can understand the frustration. But one thing I'll say for Derek, and it's something that we mentioned earlier, he's he does what he can to make right by the guys.
Yeah.
And for me personally, I'll say that I was taking care of on both events.
Okay.
So as far as me personally, I don't have any problems.
Yeah.
But it just seems the venue, I think, he may have kind of reached out a little bit further than what he should have.
Yeah.
You know what you can do.
Yeah.
Lamarck,
Mm-hmm.
that building, it's not the biggest building in the world, but you know what you're drawing there every month. You
Yeah.
know what you're getting.
Mm-hmm.
I think Mesquite may have been a little bit of a stretch. I appreciate him reaching out and trying to, make something explosive happen.
Yeah.
But, it fell short.
Well, let's talk about that, because when I broke in, and then when I started working for PCW, there were a few companies out there that ran weekly.
Right.
I mean, at PCW, there was a point where we have Uncut on Fridays and our Full Throttle shows on Saturdays. We're running 2 shows a week for years and drawing respectable crowds. Nowadays, whether you're Lone Star Championship Wrestling, whether you're NWA Branded Outlaw Wrestling, whether you're Inspired Pro, whether you're ACW, whether you're ROW, whether CWF's not even in this equation, they run once a month. CWF runs once every 4 months. I mean, that was one of the biggest issues with going there and having to feel like, do we have to follow storyline? Because you obviously don't really have one. But with that said, can a company in this day and age run weekly? Can they run weekly and sustain a good crowd in the same place?
I think they can. It's very hard to do, though, because now you have to, if you're running weekly, you run the same problem as somebody who runs monthly. Because your job is to go out there and produce content that's going to want fans to want to come back.
Mm-hmm.
So if you can get, I like the theory of weekly because it's easier to keep track of.
Yeah.
If you're running monthly or every couple of months or every 3 or 4 months, whatever, it is extremely difficult to keep people up to date on what's going on, because if me and you do a match in June and then we're not back until September or October, nobody's going to remember what we did 4 or 5 months ago.
Yeah.
Unless we just went out and just had this, 5-star WrestleMania.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's the problem, is it's so hard to see companies do that now. It's like nobody around here is running weekly. I think Booker could do it.
Yeah,
Just based on content of shows that I've been to.
yeah.
He could do, whether or not it's feasible on his schedule right now, he could do weekly or bi-weekly, and the crowds that they're getting now, they can do it, and probably more.
Yeah.
That's just my personal belief on it. Some of the other places around here, maybe not.
Well, okay, let's because with like a PCW or XCW back in the day, the one benefit that they had, which a lot of companies don't have, is a building. Like PCW was their own building.
Right.
They didn't have to worry about travel. I mean, honestly, we got spoiled. No setup, no tear down, no none of it.
Right.
You knew where we were. promoters did their job, talent just had to do their job, the writing staff did their job. So there was that. I think you take an NWA, Lone Star, NWA Houston, or whatever you want to call it, even with them drawing as well as they could they sustain it over weekly? I'm saying weekly. Now again, even with IWE, I tried running like twice a month, and that was even a struggle. And we had a building,
Right.
you know, and it was a struggle because it was, well, there's overhead, there's this, that, the other, and the business side of it was poorly ran. You know, I could go on and on about that. But you believe that a company could run weekly and sustain something?
I think they could.
Okay.
But it depends on the content.
Yeah.
Because you're not going to go out and just put together, some crap match for an opener and expect people to want to come back and see that every time.
Yeah.
Now, if you put something out like Mike Dell versus Rudy Russo, something along those lines every couple of weeks,
Yeah.
then you can do that. Because you're not going to have 5-star every night.
Yeah.
Obviously.
Yeah.
But if you give people something that is entertaining, that can captivate them, and as JR said, keep an ass every 18 inches,
Yeah.
it can happen. And there's no reason why it can't.
Yeah.
But for work ethic, for make your excuse, it doesn't happen.
Now, again, in my mindset now, it's all about exposure. I look at reality wrestling as ultimately a great business plan in the sense of they are putting out content as often as they're putting out. Now they have a television show, so it's a weekly thing.
Right.
Obviously, they're doing one taping a month, but it doesn't. I mean, they might have 12 matches. It doesn't feel like. I mean, it's a 2-hour show, so they're in and out, which is great. I mean, whereas I've been to other shows, you say 12 matches, and it is like that. Okay, how long is the show going to really be? Because talent doesn't really realize, look, man, there's other matches after yours, before yours, like.
And then you mix in intermissions.
And then you mix in like a CWF where their promos are like 20 or 30 minutes because no one has a true sense of. And I was guilty of this when I ran IWE. Of like, well, that's what I see on television, but even on television, they've tried to shorten that up to some degree. What's your view of a company creating buzz nowadays? Like I look at NWA and I think for all the good that they've done, the one thing that they're glaringly deficient in is exposure. As far as I don't see a video wire of any kind. I don't outside of the names, I don't know their story. Because if I don't go to their show, I have no idea who they are.
Right.
Again, when reality wrestling was on the internet and they're running weekly, and I mean, I've had countless conversations with Kevin about just generating content, irregardless if it has to do with a storyline. I mean, even if it was just sitting down with talent and asking them 5 questions and putting that out. Why do you feel companies don't do enough of that? Like, because I have my opinion of it. I think companies just don't think about it. I look at like Hurricane Pro, where I felt like, how hard is it to grab your cell phone that probably has a camcorder and just record interviews off that? I mean, it doesn't take a lot to. YouTube's free, Facebook's free. It doesn't cost anything to upload. It doesn't cost you anything real. I mean, outside of having a place to put that stuff, but really, I mean, once you upload it, it's there. It's there. You don't have to pay for that. So, why do you think more companies don't do that? Why do they? I mean, I look at Bob's prior to the Estrella TV deal. There was a point, I think, when me and Ryan, before I got the title, where they were at least putting out some kind of content, because I think his son was really like, I want to do this, so he had someone. But then I found once I became champ, you fast forward a couple of years and become champ, and there's no content outside of what I'm doing on YouTube or outside of what other guys are doing on YouTube. There just wasn't like a company, Hurricane Pro, like putting out something, or TASW really putting out something. So why do you think companies don't do more of that?
I think a lot of it is not them not really thinking about it. Because the internet, and I've had this discussion 100 times over, for as much bad as it's done for this business, it's done a lot of good.
Yeah.
Because it brings exposure. And it's just as simple for anybody to grab, like you said, to grab their cell phone, or if they have a little digital camera, take 30 seconds or a minute and just do something quick and upload it. It may not seem like much to you, it may seem silly or stupid to you, but if you sit there and think about it, hey, I'm getting my name out there.
Yeah.
And it's something that, maybe nobody else in this area is doing. So it gives you a chance to bring in somebody who doesn't know anything about you or that company.
Yeah.
It's like when a couple of years ago, I was delivering pizzas for Domino's, and I come up to a customer one day who opened up his door. WrestleMania 25 was on the DVD player, and he's got a DX shirt.
Nice.
And I, out of clear blue, asked him, I say, hey, you ever go to any of the local shows around here? I about fell down the stairs when he told me what local shows.
Yeah.
And it just kills me, just the, not ignorance of people, but just the lack of knowledge.
Yeah.
It's like, how do you not know with the internet and everything, how do you not know about certain places that are running?
Yeah.
And we were 10 minutes from Cypress.
Yeah.
And it's like, you're mean to tell me you're 10 minutes from their front door and you don't know that they're running every month.
Yeah.
And so I gave him every information about them, Booker, a couple other places. I said, you need to get out of here and, go check some of these places out.
Yeah, yeah.
And it got me sitting here thinking, okay, wait a minute. This guy doesn't know anything about what's going on outside of when, Vince is in town.
Yeah.
So what does it say, how hard would it be to take a couple of minutes to shoot something of yourself and put it out there, because now you're giving somebody else a chance to say, hey, this could be worth checking out, let's go.
Yeah.
And that addresses your marketing, that addresses your attendance,
Yeah.
your exposure, and that gives you a chance to open up new doors to things you wouldn't have had accessible.
Yeah.
Just, putting flyers out.
Yeah.
And then, that's the thing, you get a lot of people that they don't do anything with social media.
Well, yeah, like, case in point, when I started doing IWE, I looked at everything that I considered a failure within the industry at that point. Politics, for one. Like, I was like, just avoid it. No need for it. There's no point. Guys, I could be a top tier talent here if I wanted. I mean, actually, when I was briefed about the idea of IWE, it was just a concept. The guy wanted to bring me in to become his champion. I was like, whoa, I'd rather book your show, bring you in a whole bunch of talent. I won't even be on your show. I'll just run it. And then I was like, no one does a lot of social media stuff. And mind you, at that point, it was like MySpace. But I was like, I don't see one wrestler putting out a flyer that has to do with their company. The companies that they're running with. Doesn't take a lot. It's free. Again, it's not like you have to create the flyer. Someone will create it. Again, finding someone that would be willing to do that. And then the biggest, most glaring failure I saw was no companies were putting anything out. Like, Book wasn't doing it. Didn't see a point to it. Didn't see a need for it. But he wasn't the only one. Bob was kind of doing it again with his son. They were kind of doing stuff. I want to say they did it in part because I noticed just putting out, like, the very first video I put out was like, what's independent wrestling entertainment? What's that? And I got with that group of guys that I had. I was like, I'm having meetings with certain guys going, go film. Just, here's the day of the show. It's our first show. Get yourself over. You don't even know who your opponent is yet. Just get yourself over. Get over the company. Get yourself over. Then I chopped it up, made it into a 5-minute video, spliced it, did what I needed to do, put some funky little graphics on it, and I noticed within a couple of months, I'd go to other shows like in Austin, people would tell me, man, I've seen y'all's stuff, it's really awesome. And really, I lucked out in the sense that I did find Justin and Dojo Productions at that time, even though the money guy, I say quote unquote, because eventually the money was no longer there and we had to work for the door, but he was like, I see no need for it. And I'm like, well, I do. And I'll take our cut of the door or whatever, and I will give him a portion of it as long as he produces my video product. And me and Jay have gone on to work for now he does a lot of the production work for their television product at ROW, but I noticed just the buzz that we created off these little 3 or 4 minute vignettes. And then I fast forwarded to 2013, and I'm in the midst of 3 title reigns. Oh my God, I'm having the resurgence, like I feel great. But I'm noticing the companies I'm working for, CWF, which I see a hard camera constantly. I've never seen a bit of footage come out. TASW, Love Bob to Death. Nothing. No video content. At that point, I don't think his son was really wanting to, he was with school, so on and so forth, but still, it's like, nothing really.
Right.
Towards the end, there was stuff when I started to get into, I guess, CM Punk mode, like, I'm just tired of this, I'm burnt out, I'm tired of, same thing with Hurricane Pro, like, at first they started doing stuff, then they stopped. Right. And it was like, I didn't even want to do videos, because I'm going, well, the promotions I'm working for don't feel the need, and then I'm looking across the spectrum of companies. I'm looking at NWA making noise. There's really nothing else. There's no Video Wire. There's no ACW's still doing it. RCW's doing their long kind of 45-minute recap show, which it is what it is. I mean, my shows are very long, but they're conversations pieces.
Sure.
But at least with RCW and ACW especially, very, very good at what they do as far as promo stuff. Like I get what their characters are. Or an ROH, which is where I originally saw it, the Video Wire, and I went, why aren't companies doing this? And it really, unfortunately, messed with me in such a way to where I started to lose interest in even wanting to perform for those companies, because I'm busting my ass for you guys. Why aren't you putting stuff out there?
Right.
Because I think you can raise awareness. Again, our IWE product ran out of Houston. I had people from St. Louis going, man, if you ever want to bring your group and run under your banner, bring your cameras, we'd love to have you. But then it's like, well, there's the financial aspect of stuff. And on top of that, with IWA, I always felt like I got tired of the way the promotion was running from a business side, because I wasn't really privy to all that. And then a lot of heat that I would get because I was getting guys to hype up my show. And I'm like, I don't tell them not to hype up your show. Like, what a lot of people don't realize is when season 2 was about to hit, right before I got fired, I remember having the conversation about bringing in companies, bringing in an ACW contingent and going, no, wave your flag, talk about how great you are, you're going in direct competition with us. Or TASW. And even though I had talent that worked maybe for those shows, going, well, that would be the entry, like who you gonna join? I wanted to have like a best of the best. Like I had ultimately the idea of, like, for a year having just companies come in and us fighting them, and then it lead to this big cross promotion show. And at that point, maybe everyone's got good faith, everyone's raised their flag, maybe we buried some heat, but bring in like the NWA contingent and going, all right, let's see if you're as good as ROW, let's see if you're as good as this little IWE faction, and then having like this best of, like, I had this idea of having all these people in place and it being like a point system and leading to this final match, and it be a battle royal, because God, why not have a battle royal?
Sure.
And then
kind of like a World Cup.
Yeah, like a World Cup, and at the end having, like, of all people, Booker T like come out and just throw, like, he becomes the king of Houston. And we weren't affiliated, but I'm like, well, it'd be a great story. And then out of it, all these promotions that work within the city, it's like, well, we're fighting for the city. Obviously, we never got to that, because by that point, and then when me and Justin were doing Behind the Curtain, the one thing we always noticed was no companies wanted to work with each other. There was still this sense of, no, I've got my thing, and if you work for me, you can't work for this guy, and I've always had problems with that, again, unless there's the payoff is. But with all that said, like, I would find myself wondering why I was wrestling. You know, like, why am I going to go have this great match with AJ Rush, I always tell the story, having this match with AJ Rush at Hurricane Pro and going, no one's going to see it outside the fans that are in attendance. When it could be a great match, when we could build something off of it. At the same time, with my name, let's help build AJ in that respect, and let's create a star out of this. But at the same time, I was like, well, if they're not going to take the time, or again, shoot a 2-minute video hyping your talent, why should I do it? You know, I don't think it should just fall on the boys to be the biggest although it's a self-promotion game, I believe the promotion should at the very least have some kind of footage out there. Something to, I just think it I don't want to say it borders on lazy, I think it just borders on ignorance. They just don't realize what they have. Like NWA, as much strides as they've made, you're not giving me most exposure. Like I mean, I watched that thing that they put out on TV, and it was like, I heard from Bruce Thorpe and I heard from Tony Brooklyn. I didn't hear from Scott Summers. I didn't hear from Lance Hoyt. I didn't hear from Davey Boy Smith's kid. I didn't, from Harry. I didn't hear from Houston Carson. I didn't hear from, Barbie Hayden. Like, I didn't hear Mike Dell, Ray Rowe. All I heard was Bruce and Tony putting them, not just putting the company over, putting themselves over in a sense, but not putting over the talent. And I'm going, God, that's such a missed opportunity. Mind you, then I watched the actual matches, and the footage itself wasn't the greatest. The lighting wasn't the greatest. It was kind of one of those things of,
you're thinking of the Parade of Champions.
Parade of Champions, yeah. Because the Invasion show is a completely different, different debacle in itself.
Sorry, the name just hit me.
Yeah. Okay, let's talk about the big stories of The Undertaker losing WrestleMania. What was your feeling?
My reaction was the same as everybody else's. That as soon as the referee's hand come down for 3, everybody in the house just went, "Oh shit! What just happened?"
Yeah.
No, this is a mistake. There had to have been something screwed up.
Ref screwed up.
Yeah, ref completely.
Because there was that delay from the 3 to the bell ringing to the music playing to the announcement. Like everything.
It was that immediate shock of. And you can even see the announcer even kind of delayed. Do I even want to make this announcement?
Mm-hmm.
Should I? What just happened?
Yeah.
My personal thought on that, I thought the streak should have ended here in Houston.
Oh, in 25?
At 25. That, I think, may have been I thought it was the best chance for it to end.
Yeah.
Because I'm like a lot of people, I didn't really see a whole lot of theory in having a guy in the streak that's only there a couple of times a year.
Yeah.
You could have ended it with Michaels, you could have ended it with Hunter. You could have ended it with Flair at 17 for all we know. But just the ending the streak with somebody who just isn't there and isn't a part of the product regularly.
Yeah.
I think that's what turned everybody away.
Hmm.
Because everybody hates Brock Lesnar.
Yeah.
For one reason or another. And then to have him come out and Paul Heyman just preached for weeks about he was going to be the guy.
Yeah.
And then you see that 3 count, and even Heyman's in the ring just going,
Yeah.
What? No, you did. And I don't know, it's just, my reaction to it was just the same as everybody else's.
Well, I mean, again, you talk about WrestleMania 25, probably the greatest. I mean, we've all probably gone down and said that's probably the greatest WrestleMania match of all time. Just 2 guys, not necessarily at their peak, but necessarily you knew
They left it out there.
There was something special
Sure.
about that matchup, the night, everything. The fact that it's in Houston, probably home to one of the greatest WrestleManias of all time. In WrestleMania 17, people still revel in that WrestleMania. It's like the perfect card from top to bottom. Right. 25, I think, was awesome as well. That match was awesome. Wouldn't have wanted to see Hunter end it. I would have been cool. I would have been cool with at 26. Michaels gets his revenge, because I didn't want him the retirement. I didn't want the retirement.
Right.
It's ironic that it ends. Mr. WrestleMania retires at WrestleMania after retiring Ric Flair. Like a couple of years prior. I didn't want Hunter to win it only because I could heard the outcry. Because again, Hunter gets so much grief. Some of it's warranted, some of it isn't. I mean, you could go on and on about that. I don't necessarily want to go on about that.
Sure.
Punk last year, 2 years ago. Or last year, 29, I thought possibly because of how he had done business, the fact that his reign, for all intents and purposes, while lengthy, he wasn't the guy. Like, wasn't put on top, wasn't main eventing pay-per-views. They could say it was a main event,
Right.
but he should have main evented some of that stuff. I mean, at least some of those shows. And again, you look at those shows and what was going on with John, but I still was like, you're never truly going to show that you're making a conceited effort, a concentrated effort to raise a guy as long as John is seen as the main event guy. Doesn't matter who the champion is, because he's still the top guy. And with Punk having that run, a significant run, I mean, going through injury and still, no, don't keep the title on you, irregardless, because this reign is becoming historic. Then he does the honors for Rock, and I'm fine with that. But I figured, okay, well, he does all this stuff. Come WrestleMania, they're going to give him that, because why not? Why not? Why not? A guy who's still an active guy, who knows what would have happened had you done that. I'm not saying that it would have changed anything. Not saying that it would change his mood. Nothing like that. I mean, if they made that match last and he had actually finished off Taker, who knows? The Brock thing, while Paul was saying all that he was saying, I still am looking at it like, well, Brock, they look at it like it's a foregone conclusion that Brock's going to lose. This is going to be it's going to be 22-0. We're just going to wait till next year to talk about Taker versus Sting. That's the thing, and even though that would have been, oh, really? We want to do the streak versus career? Are we going to do that? I mean, there were so many things. I just looked at it as, in hindsight, I looked at it now as, well, we took it for granted. We took the streak for granted. We expected it to be there. Everyone expected it to be there. And Vince is like, no, I'm going to, not only am I going to take it away from you, I'm going to let someone who no one deemed deserving of it, which people can say what they want about Brock. My opinion of Brock is if he was on every Monday, he would lose some of that mystique. Right now he comes in, and when he comes in, it's such a big deal. When the music plays, it's a big deal. Irregardless, before he got the title. People criticized his push when he was losing to Hunter. I mean, when he lost to Cena in his first match back, and people don't realize, people seem to forget that it took like a chain, and it took weapons, and it took, even with Triple H, it took stuff to end him. It wasn't like, guys, if you put him one-on-one against anyone, they built him as this, it doesn't matter, y'all, unless you have a weapon, he's not going down. I didn't have a problem with it because, from a physicality standpoint, I looked at him and went, unless you're building somebody, unless you have someone in mind long term, and I don't think they have anyone in mind long term because they don't have anyone that they seem that's as durable as they've. I mean, look at Daniel Bryan.
Yeah. They
gave that guy the push of pushes, which we'll talk about. We'll talk about the Punk thing here in a minute. But he goes from main eventing WrestleMania, main eventing a pay-per-view the month after, and then we haven't really seen him up until a couple weeks ago.
Right.
And that was the guy like, well, everybody likes this guy. He could be the next one. We kind of failed with Punk. We'll do all the things right that we didn't do with Punk. We'll main event this guy. We'll put him over on Triple H. We'll put him over on Evolution. We'll give him the title at the end. We'll get all that. And then he's hurt. Look at Roman Reigns. This is the next guy. That's the next guy. He looks the part. He acts the part. May not have the walk and talk just yet. But he's hurt.
Yep.
He's on the shelf. So there's not... The only guy who's really durable is Cena. They go, well, here you go. I don't have a problem with Brock being champ. I just don't at this point.
Everybody's biggest problem, I think, with Brock being champ is the fact that he's not there to defend it. Because everybody's used to that 30-day title defense rule.
Yeah.
And, of course, that's blown clear out of the water now because we're only going to see him a limited number of dates during the year.
Yeah.
But I agree with you in the sense that it's not so much a bad thing that he's not there regularly because it adds more to it when he is there.
And at least they've done, he wins the streak, And even when he became slotted to take on whoever at SummerSlam, or when he won the title, there was still that doubt, like, are they really going to pull the trigger and give him the title given his schedule? And then I think they've done. His run's been fine. He's won it. I don't think any guy really wins or loses anything by winning or losing. I think it's just the character.
Okay.
But and again, it's really how they lose. Again, Brock hasn't lost a one-on-one matchup where it's been straight up. Always a weapons involved, sledgehammer, stairs, whatever have you, chain. But so I haven't had a real big problem with it. It's seemingly the show just continues to go on.
Yeah.
Now you listen to the Punk. What was your opinion of Punk when you heard about the walkout? What was your initial reaction to that when you hear like this guy's not going to be there, and then just all the reporting that went on, all the speculation of what it could possibly be? What was your initial thought of it when he walked out?
For the most part, I'd always been a Punk guy.
Yeah.
It dates back to when he was with TNA.
Mm-hmm.
Seeing him get on the roll that he was on, and then he was on this incredible streak, and then all of a sudden Royal Rumble comes around, and just like the door got slammed and he walked.
Yeah.
And I just remember thinking at the time, I understood his frustration. I saw where he was coming from. I think I would have gone about it a little bit differently.
Yeah.
Obviously, I don't think walking out that night the way that he did, or Monday night the way he did, I don't think that was the way that he should have gone about it.
Yeah.
Of course, everybody's had their say since then, but I don't know. It's still weird to me because everything that's happened this year with everything.
Yeah.
Punk. I can't really tell you if I think that he's right or wrong about it. I really can't, because on one hand, I agree with him.
Yeah.
Because you're frustrated. We've all worked for people before, whether it's in this business or out. We've worked for people. We got frustrated. Screw you. I'm done.
Yeah.
But in a position where Punk was at, I think maybe sitting down at least one night and trying to talk it out. I think that may have been a little bit better way to go about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sitting down with Vince before Raw, going, okay, here's the thing. I'm hurt. I'm busted up. I'm tired of everything. I'm not loving the fact that you're bringing the Hollywood guys in. You brought Rock back in the last couple of years. Fine, I'll deal with that. Now you're bringing Batista back.
Yeah.
How long is he going to be here? You're bringing Brock back. How long is he going to be here? You're bringing these part-timers back when you've got guys like me, Dolph Ziggler, these guys who are busted every night, and we're not getting the due respect that we need.
Yeah.
That we deserve.
Yeah.
And now, I think with what he said with the podcast, and even back then, everybody's kind of viewing him more as now, okay, now you're just whining.
Yeah.
You know what you're signing up for when you make this decision.
Yeah.
You become a wrestler. Obviously, it's not ballet. You're gonna get broken up. You're gonna get beat up. And I think a lot of people maybe thought that he kind of over-exaggerated, some details.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I'm still a Punk guy.
Yeah. Well, because I kind of, not that it was really as similar, when Austin walked.
Mm-hmm.
I've been an Austin guy ever since I probably first saw him, Stunning Steve. I'm like a lot of people. Like, I saw it, didn't necessarily see what he would become. But I remember Stunning Steve back in those days, versing Chris Adams and going, all right, this guy's he's got size, he looks the part. What he got on his role, and he was the hottest thing in wrestling ever. And then when he walked, I was like a fan, like, why would you walk?
Right.
And then he walked because he didn't want to do the honors. More, at that point, I'm a wrestler going, oh man, I could do that. None of us could say, well, I just don't want to do it, I don't like creative. So when Punk walked, I honestly assumed it wasn't just one thing. And maybe in part because I was going through a lot of the same stuff earlier, like in 2013, going through that. I'm just tired.
Yeah.
Tired of carrying the load. I'm tired of, for him, I mean, you're part of this multi-billion-dollar corporation. You sign a contract. I can understand that. But I wasn't one of those like, man, you quit. Because I saw all the good that kind of came out of it. Obviously, because a lot of it got reported. What happened to Daniel Bryan, which I really felt like, well, God, it's his year. Why haven't you guys really factored him into your WrestleMania plans?
Right.
Why is he in a match with Sheamus? Or why is he in a match with Sheamus? For like the third time in WrestleMania, they've been married to each other.
Yeah.
When I heard the podcast, I looked at it as, I didn't really consider it whining. I figured he had a lot to get off his chest. He'd probably been, I know a lot of people wanted to know why. I was glad that he actually used the platform. At the same time, I could say, well, if I was making as much money as you were making, and I'm in the position you're in, why not talk to Vince? Why not pull Vince aside? If you've been able to talk to Vince in the past, and like you said, no, I didn't want to die on that hill, why not, like you said, earlier in the day, maybe after Royal Rumble. Regardless of how fed up you are,
Right.
I think
That should have been his go-to move, is pull Vince aside either.
Yeah, if you didn't like creative, if you didn't like how legal was dealing with you, if you weren't getting the answers that you needed, and maybe you were doing the good soldier thing by talking to the appropriate people, at the end of the day, Vince is the guy to talk to. Vince could change whatever in an instant. If he so wanted, he obviously could be like, nah, we'll just rewrite it. I don't care, so that. But at the same time, I have been in that position. I have been in a position where I'm top guy at PCW. We're in the midst of this team tournament, Fight, Win, Survive. I'm in a match with BJ Turner. I have my girl at the time, she's valeting for me. Life is good. I just got an offer to come to Houston, and we're not contracted, regardless of what anyone says on the internet. No one's really signing an exclusivity contract. You agree to work exclusively, or you agree to work with a company, but you're not under some multi-year. You're not making hundreds of thousands of dollars. God, I wish. But during that match, I didn't care what the future held for me. I had done everything I could possibly do at PCW. I held every title, had been in enough marquee matchups, and thought I need to change, because I was just so frustrated, in large part because I was there all the time. I was at that building 6 days out of the week, sometimes 7 days out of the week. So this idea of being in that bubble and like going, how do I get out of it? Like, I could see him just going, man, if I'm still here, it's not going to change. If I take a couple of weeks off, it's not going to change. When I come back, maybe my mentality is still the same, like, this is a bad place, I don't want to be here. So I could see if he had just had enough, all right, cool, walk. You weren't in anything major. They weren't really doing anything with you past, who knows? And if you were going to be not stuck with Hunter, because if I got the chance to work Hunter, that
Sign me up.
Yeah. You want that WrestleMania payday, and again, the network, it is what it is. It's the future. It's here. Obviously, they've cut costs here and there. They've even cut costs of what they sign guys to initial deals. It's 3 times less what it used to be, especially in the Attitude Era. I remember guys like, making like 75 to 100 grand just to get signed, and now it's like 25 to 30 grand.
Right.
And there's no guarantee at this point. There's really no guarantee. They can keep it in NXT forever at this point. So I didn't necessarily have an issue with what he said. Then I listened to Vince's. He hadn't heard Punk's. I know you hadn't heard Vince's. He hadn't heard Punk's podcast, which I was fine with. I mean, again, if it was something major, I'm sure there are people within the company that could have been like, well, he said this, and this. Here's kind of or he could have read a report if he needed to. I don't necessarily had to wait the 2 hours to kind of. I found it really interesting Vince's take on things, because you rarely hear from Vince in any outside of those shareholder conference calls. You don't, and he really doesn't get into specifics as to what he looks for, his view of the title, which I found kind of, as a writer, I probably adhere to the same thing. The title's a prop, doesn't really matter who's got it. At the same time, I go, well, if that's really your belief, Vince, then why did you have such a hard time giving Daniel the title? It took you long enough. I mean, obviously it's a storyline, or just certain things, like his views on Cesaro, like, well, he's Swiss. There was that was the gleaming thing, like, well, that's, at the same time I go, well, Cesaro's as articulate as he is, he's not the greatest promo, because I don't think he's found what he is within the universe. I think I see that on the indie level a lot. Guys just don't really know who they are, and they're just kind of acting how they think they should act, or but they don't have really a clear idea of who they are. And I see a lot of old school promos, and I watch things and go, well, that's just not the way to do it anymore. Like, a lot of the old habits are falling by the wayside, and you see guys that are still having issues with that, like coming up to speed. Like, I tell guys whenever I'm helping guys with promos, to not even think of it as a promo. Like, think of it as you're having a conversation with that guy. What do you, like, put some realism to it. Don't just come in and say, let me tell you something, brother. Because that just doesn't, unless that's your character, that doesn't work for today's market. You have to be almost conversational. You have to be able to cut a promo without even it coming across as a promo at this point. Because then people just tune off to that stuff nowadays. Whereas I can watch a network and go, wow, it was great back in the day, but it doesn't fly in this, much like Rock's act doesn't fly outside of it being Rock. No one else can do that because it just doesn't work. People just go, that's Attitude Era, it's not today. How do you feel about the state of wrestling right now as far as independent wrestling?
Right now, I think there's still a lot of work to be done.
Mm-hmm.
There's some places that are doing it right. There's some places that, God love them, I don't know what to do with them.
Yeah.
But like when I started reporting, I want to see everybody do as well as they can. But the problem is getting everybody kind of on the same mindset of doing things the right way.
Yeah.
And it's you can't. It's almost impossible to get everybody on the same page anymore, because everybody wants to do their own thing.
Yeah.
And just like you were saying, not everybody's thing is going to work everywhere.
Yeah.
What worked for Hogan in 1990 is not going to work today.
No, not unless you're doing some tribute or, well, here, like, I look at, I've been to other promotions, not recently, especially being on a hiatus, like, I don't even want to go to shows half the time. I like the idea of having my weekends free.
Sure.
But at the same time, I look at books stuff, and I go, he runs a tight enough ship, and everyone's on board with it. You take those guys in any other element where there isn't someone that is holding them accountable for whatever reason. IWE, I was all about creative freedom. When I booked Uncut, all about creative freedom. Do whatever you want that you feel is going to get you over. Now, if I see something that's glaringly obvious that it's not working, I'll let you know. But my motto at IWE, and to some extent was always, with IWE, was like, get yourselves over, that's what the camera's for, to get you over. Like, placate to it, get yourself over, don't ever turn yourself off if the camera's on, be some semblance of what you are, so that you can promote yourself to such a degree. But I held guys accountable. That show was a work for the door, so I could have been like, guys, you do whatever you want. You can have matches as long as you want, you can go, but I didn't want to do that. Because to me it was like, well, I don't want the crowd to be exhausted. I want them to leave wanting more. I want them to leave wanting to come back. I want them to leave going, I was really entertained for those 6, 7, 8 matches, but none of them overstayed their welcome. Same thing when I booked battle royals and it was at the end of the show, I'd always be like, the first part, your match, is the introduction to that. So treat it as such. Regardless of what you've got going on, treat it as such. I think there's just not enough accountability. I look at CWF, for example. Derek's a great, nice guy who allows the inmates to run the asylum. So there is no sense of, you have to do it this way. Because if I was backstage, I would be like, no, you're not going to go 45 minutes, girls. I don't care. I don't care. We've got 15 matches. Why should I let you have all the time? Why? Give me a good excuse. You think in 45 minutes you will get the same reaction if you go 5 to 6? Do you honestly believe that you're going to get more time? You believe that in this arena you're going to get more out of it because you're going to go longer. Like, I always think less is more. I don't believe Texas crowds care for the ROH Japanese strong style. I think old school storytelling still does the trick. But I think what I see with indie wrestling a lot of times is that there is truly no accountability. There is this very good-natured guys who seriously do not hold people accountable. When I've booked shows, when I've been on shows that were well booked, the accountability was there. And more so, the entire group of people, talent, believed in that. Whereas I go to other indie shows and it is, let's just have fun. And it's like, guys, I'm not here just to have fun. I mean, I'm going to have fun when I'm performing, but I'm not here to just have a good time and just do whatever I want. I take the crowd into account. Like, I did a reunion show not too long ago. It was like one of the last shows that I wrestled on, and it was a PCW reunion show. And the guy who was running it, I really believe wholeheartedly, like he's got genius-like qualities in the way he puts shows together. But I noticed he gave guys a lot of freedom, tremendous amount of freedom. So within match 3, we were already an hour delay behind, as far as. So I'm going, okay. My match was close to like midway through it, so we had a few more matches. And I remember just joking with my opponent going, look, man, no one cares what I do. They're not going to, they don't want to see me wrestle. They just want to see the kick. They just want to see you get blasted in the face. They want to see me blast you in the face and wave to the crowd. That's all they care about. I said, so if we just do that, nothing else. I said, in the meantime, since you're doing the honors, man, get yourself over. Get on the mic, just talk all kinds of smack till the kick happens. It doesn't, everything else. And we did that, and everyone said it was like the most entertaining segment. And then I watch other talent like trying to go out there having a 25, 30-minute match and going, crowd doesn't, they're tired. Like they don't, so I think that's where I see it. I don't, on top of like lack of true exposure, where it's not, it does fall on the talent to do it more often than not. I just don't see a whole lot of accountability. I see a lot of guys trying to be nice. And moreover, I see talent not wanting to be critiqued. Like they get to the back. I always wanted, and we've all been there. Go to the back. How was my match? That was good. Okay. Could you give me more? Oh man, it was good. So you can't tell me
anything that I could change.
Yeah, was there something
I should have left out?
I did hear some like no noise here and there. I mean, so partly when I came to books initially, I wanted that. That's what I wanted. I wanted the critique. I wanted brutal honesty. And the same thing when I talk to friends of mine. Like I'm like, don't tell me I did great, because in my ego, I assume everything I do is awesome. Sure. Tell me if it's off. Tell me if I didn't do it right.
You need details.
Yeah. So I get tired of that, but I get tired moreover of young talent you try to tell them something, and they don't want to hear it. And so then it's like, or they get offended, or they get, or they're upset that you don't consider them great. So I think it is a generational thing too. I mean, when I first broke in, it was like that, like where I thought I knew more than I did. So if certain veterans told me, and I was like looking at the guy like, do you really know what you're talking about? I would probably question. I wouldn't tell them that. But now you have talent who actually, what have you done? It's like, I've booked shows, I've put shows together. A lot of the Texas talent that's really good now, I'm kind of the guy who helped it. Yeah, all that talent in Dallas. Yeah, that's kind of me.
You're welcome.
Yeah. Robert Evans, you're welcome, man. I'm glad you're doing so well at ROH. ACH, I saw your talent, told you like, man, maybe you need to get out of here because this, you don't want to get stuck, you know. Or you have guys who criticize certain styles, like they criticize commercial, they criticize television style. I'm like, guys, that's all what we all are. I think that's what we all aspire for. That's where the most money's made. Why would you criticize it? Like I see certain talent, like I would never go to WWE. I'm like, man, sign me to that contract. I don't care how bad it might be for certain guys. Like I hear friends of mine who are on the roster who are like, man, it sucks. I'm like, you're getting paid. You are getting paid to be there. I understand how difficult it might be, but you knew what you signed up for.
Part of me thinks that whenever somebody looks me in the eye and says, man, I would not go to WWE if they handed me an open contract, part of me just wants to slap them. Because I'm sitting there thinking, are you serious right now?
Yeah.
You're going to tell me that somebody can walk up with you and hand you a paycheck to do your job, and you'd be like, nah, I'm good. I'm good where I'm at.
Yeah.
So you're good where you're at. You wouldn't want to get better. You wouldn't want to go.
Yeah.
You wouldn't want to advance somewhere. No, I'm good. Shut up.
Yeah. Yeah.
It kills me. And it's like, I think they're lying almost half the time. Because I think that's it should be everybody's desire is to advance, to get to that next level.
Yeah.
You know, you talk about critiquing the WWE style, the TV style. Really, you're critiquing the spot that you want to be somewhere. So,
Yeah.
You know, some of the older guys may not be in a position. They may know now. Okay, they may not have that shot.
Yeah.
But you get the guys who are just breaking in that are critiquing that style, going, really? Because that could be you here in 5 or 10 years.
Yeah. Yeah.
What are you doing?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. So I'm real curious as to how Houston's going to kind of fare moving forward as far as. I mean, you got TSW, they've got a TV deal for the time being. Not sure how long that is. I know Book's Cube deal is coming up here shortly, but they're Soul to South. I think they've worked out their issues. So I think Soul to South is rebroadcasting some of their stuff. And I know with them, they are doing, like, they're bringing in Pro Wrestling Syndicate to this next Christmas Chaos show. I know Book's real kind of big about doing cross-promoting in the sense of like our group versus your group, which I do like because I was a big fan of that. When I was thinking of doing something like that, I'm real curious as to what's going to happen with Lone Star without the NWA moniker, what that means for that talent that was there, that was working with them as part of the NWA exclusivity to some degree. And now that there isn't really that, because I don't think Tony, unless he's got some, outside of a national TV deal or some type of exposure deal, doesn't really have a lot to tell them, well, you can't work here and work everywhere else. I'm intrigued what happens with CWS next show, given some of the issues that he's had, and hopefully he's kind of learned from some of those mistakes. All you can hope for is to learn. All I would tell guys with that is if you are hoping to run shows, like, you can't wait solely on the door beforehand. Like, you should have had all that ahead of time, especially if you knew you were going to travel and that there was that possibility that you're not going to draw as well. I mean, with those situations, because with the EWF one, I still got paid what I was asked, even though we didn't draw well. But again, like, Derek's always treated me right. So you're still doing the Examiner stuff, and you've kind of transitioned to baseball. We're about to wrap this up because we've almost 2 hours.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah, it's long. It's long when you're talking. But you know, you're liking the product WWE so far, or
I do. I like the fact that they're kind of starting to fuse in some of the NXT guys a little bit more.
yeah,
I like. Well, it's weird. I don't know if it's just me, but I like the NXT product a little bit more because you're getting more athleticism. You're not getting so much of the showboat style.
yeah,
They focus more on the wrestling than they do the entertainment.
yeah,
And that's kind of what I pay more attention to because I want to see what they can actually bring.
yeah,
You get a guy like John Cena, we know what he's capable of because we saw what he did at UPW, we saw what he did at OVW. But I think he's kind of handicapped by what we've seen over the last decade or so.
yeah,
You know, he gets kind of handcuffed to that 5 moves of doom.
Yeah.
But we know that, you know, he can do a lot more.
Well, that's the formula, you know, and I
Right.
think the formula is somewhat changing to some degree. I'm real interested in what the future holds. The fact that they have signed some of those international guys, I'm real kind of interested in what they do with Owens, not Steen anymore.
Yeah.
I think they're doing a really good job of building guys, even on that product. I mean, the promos for Owens have been great. Like I said, my girl and I watch NXT. That's about the only. I mean, she'll watch it if I have it on. If there's pay-per-view, I'm real interested to see what happens with the network. I'm a fan of it. I've been a fan of it since day one.
Yep.
I was a fan of Netflix when it first came out. So I mean, you know, I've been a member for years. So I never. When people would tell me, "Man, I'm going to go through all the content and have nothing else to watch," I was like, "There's no way. I don't have enough time in my day
Right.
to." And I watch it about as frequently as I watch Netflix. So it's like I don't have to watch everything, you know. And there's a lot of stuff that I haven't watched that I've been like, "Man, I really want to see that," but I'm really like, they have certain specials. I'll watch them. NXT I'll watch, and then I might watch their documentary stuff is really great. The Monday Night War stuff. Great for revisionist history.
Yes.
It's awesome. But again, it is revisionist history. But when you're the winner, you can make history however you want.
Right.
We could get into a whole lot. Unfortunately, we're like so close to that time. So they can catch you on the Examiner if they want to read your stuff. Is there a particular URL for that?
I did have a couple at some point in time. Actually, if you go to if you get on Facebook and just look up the Texas Pro Wrestling Examiner,
Okay.
Or the MLB Examiner,
Okay.
you can find me either one. And if you catch me on Twitter at BlitzHeartThrob, I post all the links there anyway.
Okay. Yeah, you got to do that. Everyone, it's like Facebook or Twitter is like the central point.
Yeah, unlike a lot of people, I will use what's there in front of me.
Yeah.
I'll use what I can to get myself over.
Yeah, awesome, man. Well, hopefully we can do this again at some point, and
Sure.
we can kind of talk about some of the stuff we didn't get a chance to talk to.
Cool.
But thanks again, man.
Thank you, man. Appreciate it.